Okay, so let's talk about section 4.2, and that's the standard form of a quadratic function. So we've done vertex form. Now let's talk about standard form. So standard form of a quadratic is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And that's when your a value does not equal 0. Okay, if a is greater than 0, so the number in front of the x squared, if that's greater than 0, the graph opens up to happy space. If a is less than 0, if it's negative, then it would open down. The axis of symmetry, you will need to have this memorized, is this formula, x equals negative b over 2 times a. So your b is your term in front of your x, and your a is your term in front of the x squared. You plug it into that formula, and that gives you your axis of symmetry. The x-coordinate of the vertex is the axis of symmetry. Okay, so then that's also the x-coordinate of your vertex. You plug that value in for x and solve the equation. So whatever you get here, you're going to plug it in to your original equation for x, and then solve it, and that will give you your y-coordinate of the vertex. The y-intercept is always your c term, so it's at 0, c. And you'll use that a lot whenever you're graphing these. Okay, so let's graph one. We've got identify a, b, and c. So a, what's in front of the x squared? That's just 1. Your b is 2, and your c is 3. So your axis of symmetry, remember the formula, negative b over 2a. So if we're going to solve that, so our b value is 2, so it's going to be negative 2 over 2 times our a value, which is 1. So that'd be negative 2 over 2, so negative 1. All right, so now to find the vertex, remember you plug that in, that negative 1, into our original equation for your x values. So right there and there. So this would be negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 plus 3. Whenever you work all that out, negative 1 squared is 1, minus 2, so it'd be negative 1 plus 3 would give you positive 2. So your vertex is at negative 1, 2. Oh, and I forgot to write, my axis of symmetry is at x equals negative 1. All right, the fourth step is to find the y-intercept. Remember, that's always your c value. So your y-intercept is at 0, 3. Now let's graph our vertex and our y-intercept and the reflection of the y-intercept. So you go over to negative 1, up to 2. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to redo that point. It's a little sloppy. Okay, so here we go. Go over to negative 1, up to 2. And then our axis, or our y-intercept, was at 3. So we'll graph right there. So if our axis of symmetry is right here, you do not have to draw this, but I will for this time. That means on either side of that dashed line, we're going to be symmetrical. So if this is at 3 over here, 1 away from the axis of symmetry, it'll also be right here because it is symmetrical. So that is enough. You can just stop there. I mean, that graph isn't the prettiest, but so that is how you graph them. You only need 3 points. Sometimes you might need more. If you wanted, you can make a table and plot some points. Like you could pick positive 1 for your x-coordinate, maybe negative 3 if you wanted to be double sure. But if you can do it just like this and get it right, I am perfectly okay with that using these tricks. So let's talk about what this means. Does this have a minimum or a maximum? So this would have a minimum because we are never going to go below this point right here. So since we're never going to go below that, that would be the minimum. The minimum is, on this one, remember your y-coordinate of your vertex. So the minimum is at 2. Let's also talk about domain. So domain is going to be your x values, and you're going to go all the way from negative infinity to positive infinity because it goes on forever in both directions. And then lastly, let's talk about our range. Oops, I don't need parentheses. Okay, so since this has a minimum, you know it has a lower bound. So the minimum is 2, so that will be your lower bound. And your upper bound is infinity because it goes up and up forever. So it goes from 2 to infinity. Okay, let's go to the next page. We have another one. So we know right off the bat, that negative right there, this is going to be an upside down, sad face parabola. It's going to be facing down. So let's start with, if you wanted to write out your A, B, and C, you could. I'm not going to, but you can if you want to, if it helps you. Let's find our axis of symmetry. Remember, axis of symmetry is negative B over 2A. So this will be negative 12 over 2 times negative 6. So negative 12 is positive 12 over negative 12. So that will give me negative 1. So my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. Now to find the y-coordinate of my vertex, you're going to plug in that negative 1 into the original equation. So negative 6 times negative 1 squared minus 12 times negative 1 minus 1. So if you want, when you're doing this, you can plug all of that into your calculator. I don't care because you're going to have access to your calculator. Whichever, if you mess up or if you just want to work it out in your head or show your work, I don't care either way. I use my calculator just to be a little bit quicker. So you get 5 for that value there. So your vertex is going to be at negative 1, 5. Okay, and the last thing we need to know is our y-intercept. And your y-intercept is at 0, and then your c value, and in this case it's negative 1. So let's plot this. We have negative 1, positive 5. And then we have our y-intercept, which we said was negative 1. Okay, our axis of symmetry is that line. I'm not going to draw it, but you can if you would like to. So to do the other half of our parabola, we're going to be symmetrical. So we're going to go 1 away and down to negative 1 on the other side. So here is your parabola. It is a pretty skinny one. So that is it for graphing that one. Okay, one more graphing. What's going to happen whenever there's a 1/2 out front? Well, it's going to be a little bit wider. So let's find our vertex, of course. So we have negative B over 2A. So this will be like negative 2 over 2 times 1/2. So that'll be negative 2 over 2 times 1/2 is 1. So negative 2. So our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. Now we need to plug this into the original equation. 1/2 times negative 2 squared plus 2 times, negative 2 minus 8. So we put all that in and you get negative 10. So my vertex is at negative 2, negative 10. And last one, our y-intercept is at 0, negative 8. Okay, let's graph it. Negative 2, negative 10 is right here. And then our y-intercept, negative 8, Then go in the opposite direction. It would be right here. Alrighty, there is your graph. That's it. Okay, now identify the vertex, axis of symmetry, the minimum or maximum value, and the range of each parabola. So the vertex we've done, the axis of symmetry is, we've done that. The minimum or maximum is the y value of your vertex. And remember, your minimum is for a happy face, a facing up parabola is what I mean, and you'll have a maximum when it's a sad face. And we have to do the range, so that's another thing. So first we need to identify the vertex. So we have to do the axis of symmetry technically. So negative b over 2a, that will be negative times negative 4 over 2 times 3. That will give me positive 4 over 6, which is 2/3. Okay, so we know the axis of symmetry is x equals 2/3. We've got one answer. Okay, now let's do the vertex. So we have to find the y-coordinate. This will be 3 times 2/3 squared minus 4 times 2/3 minus 2. Plug all of that in your calculator or work it out, and you get negative 3 1/3. So that's your y-coordinate of your vertex. So your vertex is at 2/3, negative 3 1/3. So there's another answer. Oops. All right, what else did we need to find? We need to find the minimum or the maximum. Is this a happy face or a sad face parabola? Well, this is a happy face. It's facing up, and I know that because that number right there, 3 in front, is positive. So we will have a minimum. So the minimum value, remember, is your y value of your vertex, the y coordinate of your vertex. So it will be negative 3 1/3. There's another answer. And then we need to find the range. So the range, you deal with the y coordinate again, the minimum. So if it's a minimum, it's going to go from negative 3 1/3 up to infinity, because that's the minimum value. It goes from there and then everything above it. And I think we got all the pieces, so we are finished. Same thing on the next one. We've got negative b over 2a, so that would be negative 3 over 2 times negative 2. Yay, we get some more fractions. So that would give me positive 3 over negative 4. So our axis of symmetry would be x equals negative 3/4. Now let's plug that in. That's one answer. Let's plug that in to find out the vertex. So that would be negative 2 times negative 3/4 squared minus 3 times negative 3/4 plus 4. If you're using your calculator, which I'm guessing you probably are, especially because there's all these fractions, be careful and take your time typing it in and double check before you hit enter, just so you make sure you got all the negative pieces, all the squares, you're not missing anything. So when you solve that, you get positive 5 1/8. So your vertex would be negative 3/4, comma, 5 1/8. All right, and then what else do we need? We need is this a minimum or a maximum value? Well, this has a negative 2 out front, so this will have a maximum value because it's a sad face parabola. So the max will be at your y value, 5 1/8. And then the last one is the range. So your range is, if the maximum is 5 1/8, it's going to, that'll be the upper bound. So 5 1/8 is your upper bound, and it goes from negative infinity to 5 1/8. Okay. The next one. So this is a binomial instead of a trinomial. Don't freak out. This is like 2x squared plus 0x plus 3. right? So your b term on this one is 0. Don't let it freak you out. Don't say the b term is 3 because it's not. So that's okay if there's not a middle term or maybe there's not a last term. Just stay calm. So we've got negative b over 2a. So what is negative 0 divided by 2 times 2? Well, that's 0. So your axis of symmetry is x equals 0. Now, this will be easy to plug in, right? I love plugging in 0. So we've got for our vertex 2 times 0 squared plus 3. That's just 3. So your vertex is going to be at 0, 3. Now, will this be a happy face or a sad face? It's positive 2, so it's a happy face. So this will have a minimum. The minimum value is at 3. And the last thing is the range. The range, since it has a minimum, that will be the lower bound. So it starts at 3 and goes to infinity. All right, last part of these notes. Convert the following to vertex form. So there's a few steps on how you do this. I would definitely write this down. So step 1 is find the vertex. Okay, find the vertex. And then plug it in to vertex form. Remember, vertex form is y equals a parentheses x minus h parentheses squared plus k. You got to pay attention to that negative sign. Don't mess that up. That's probably the biggest mistake y'all will make, forgetting the negative. And then the last step, 3, is to keep the a value the same. Okay, doesn't sound too bad. The hardest part will be finding our vertex, and we know how to do that. So finding the vertex of this bad boy is we are going to do negative b over 2a. So that will be negative 10 over 2 times 2. It'll be negative 10 over 4. We're always going to reduce fractions. Negative 5 halves. Yay, another fraction. Okay. So now let's plug that into the equation. So I have 2 times negative 5 halves squared plus 10 times negative 5 halves plus 7. Again, type in your calculator, but be careful. You get negative 5 1/2. Or you could say negative 11 halves or 5.5. Whatever you do, just make sure you're either all fractions or all decimals. Okay, so it's time to plug it in vertex form. So I'm going to have y equals the a term. Remember, a term stays the same. So 2 parentheses x. Okay, our h value or our x coordinate is negative. So that will be like negative 5 halves. And then squared. And then plus your k value, which is negative 5 halves. 5 1/2, sorry, negative 5 1/2. So I wrote it that way. You can go straight to the next step if you are confident. I was just showing you what I was doing. So I am going to clean it up. So our final answer will be 2 parentheses x plus 5 halves parentheses squared minus 5 1/2. So that's what it'll look like when you are finished. Okay, next one. Find the vertex. Negative b over 2a. So that would be negative 4 over 2 times negative 1. Be negative 4 over negative 2, so that's positive 2. Let's plug that in. So we're going to have negative times 2 squared plus 4 times 2 minus 5. You plug all of that in, you get negative 1. So your vertex is at 2, negative 1. Let's plug it in. So I'm going to have y equals negative, you could put -1 or just negative, negative parentheses x, my x value is positive, so it's x minus 2. Don't forget the squared sign because it will be wrong if you don't. Minus 1. And you're done. You just converted it to vertex form. Not too bad.